We all carry this kind of invisible calculator in our heads. Like, think about your own life for a second.
Oh, absolutely. We do it all the time.
Right. You meet someone new at a party, you ask what they do for a living, and almost instantly, you've calculated a rough estimate of their societal net worth.
Yep. Useful or not useful.
Exactly. It's a clean, deeply ingrained transaction. But today, for our deep dive, we're taking a stack of research specifically, a really profound essay by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks, PhD, titled Priced Out of Personhood, Beyond the Market's Imagination.
Such a powerful title, honestly.
It really is. And we're going to see what happens when we take that invisible calculator and just smash it. Our mission today is to unpack this radical idea, like what happens when we stop measuring human worth, specifically autistic lives, by what the economic ledger dictates, and instead build something entirely new.
It's a huge question because it forces us to look at the very foundation of how society determines who matters. You know, we like things to be measurable. We really like sorting human capability into neat little columns.
Oh, for sure. Spreadsheets make people comfortable.
They do.
Yeah.
But when you apply that market-driven mindset to actual human lives, especially individuals who, do not naturally map onto those neat columns that ledger stops looking like an accounting tool, it starts looking like a mechanism for exclusion.
So true. And, if you are listening to this right now on your commute or maybe during a break, consider how often you justify your own existence through the lens of productivity. Like when you take a day to rest, do you call it recharging just so you can justify working harder the next day?
That is so common. The guilt is real.
It's everywhere. Do you feel a pang of guilt when a hobby doesn't turn into a monetizable side hustle? But Hoerricks is challenging us to imagine a reality where your value isn't tied to that ledger at all.
But to even begin imagining what Hoerricks calls moving beyond the market, we first have to map out the current boundaries of that market. We need to understand the default setting.
That's how the market actually views things right now.
Exactly. In the essay, Hoerricks outlines how the modern economic system basically forces autistic individuals to justify their existence. The market does not look at an autistic person and see a whole human being. It looks at them and assigns them to one of three highly restrictive categories.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
If I'm an autistic individual navigating this traditional economic system, what is the first way the market categorizes me?
Well, the first category on the ledger is the burden.
Oof, that's a heavy word.
It is. But a market-driven society is organized entirely around capital generation and efficiency, right? So if an individual requires support or accommodations or just like alternative pacing without immediately generating a return on that investment, the market reduces them to a cost.
Just a liability.
Right, a liability. In this framing, the person's actual humanity is completely eclipsed by their perceived expense to the system.
Wow. I mean, the messaging there must be incredibly insidious because it's not just a corporation looking at an employee.
Yeah.
It's a societal narrative.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's the language we hear in news reports about the cost of public support programs or special education. It literally reduces a complex human life to a negative integer on a spreadsheet.
And the psychological weight of that, especially from a young age, is just immense. But, let's say the market doesn't view the individual as a total loss. They might get bumped over to the second category, which is the repair project.
The repair project, okay.
Yeah. This is the framing that suggests the individual is fundamentally broken but has potential. The market logic dictates that with enough intervention, behavioral conditioning, therapy, whatever, they might be fixed enough to eventually achieve a baseline market value.
Man, that one hits hard. It feels remarkably like the concept of flipping a house.
Oh, that's a really good way to put it.
Right. You buy a property that the market deems distressed. You go in, you tear out the unique architectural quirks, you paint everything a universally acceptable neutral beige, and you force it to conform to what a generic buyer wants.
Exactly.
Except we aren't talking about real estate here. We are talking about treating a human mind like a renovation project, like sanding down a person's natural traits and ways of moving through the world just so they can hit a higher resale value on the job market.
The mechanism of that house flipping analogy perfectly captures the harm because it operates on the assumption that the original structure, meaning the autistic person's natural neurology, has zero inherent worth.
Right. Its only value is how close it can get to the normal houses on the block.
Exactly. The interventions aren't designed to make the person happier or more fulfilled. They're designed to make the person indistinguishable from their neurotypical peers, just so they can participate in standard commerce.
Which leaves us with the third category. If I'm not written off as a burden, and I haven't been successfully renovated into a neurotypical mold and beige paint, what does the ledger do with me?
Well, it might classify you as a selective asset. Hoerricks also refers to this as a niche productivity asset.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
This happens when the market realizes it doesn't need to fix you entirely, because it can extract and monetize a very specific part of your neurodivergence.
I see where this is going.
Right. Think of the modern corporate obsession with the quote-unquote autistic superpower. Like, a tech company might highly value an autistic savant whose capacity for intense hyper-focus allows them to code for 14 hours straight without making an error.
So wait, I'm going to push back on this for a second because I can hear people listening wondering about this. In a system that routinely treats people as burdens or broken things, isn't being labeled an asset a massive step up? Isn't corporate recruitment of neurodivergent talent a form of acceptance?
That's the trap. It looks like acceptance on the surface, but the underlying mechanism is still incredibly dangerous.
How so?
Because being a selective asset is conditional. The market isn't valuing the whole complex person. It's only valuing the extractable resource. It basically turns the individual into a utility knife. Yeah. If that developer burns out from coding 14-hour days, or if they suddenly require accommodations that cut into the profit margin, or if their specific hyper-focus is no longer useful to the company's bottom line, their value plummets back to zero. They are discarded.
So the personhood is still, as the essay's title suggests, priced out.
Exactly.
So the trap of the ledger is absolute. You are either a drain on resources, a fixer-upper, or a highly specialized tool to be used until you break. I mean, it's easy to see why advocates spend their entire lives fighting these labels. They write books, organize protests, and dedicate their careers to pointing out how dehumanizing this three-column ledger really is.
Which introduces the central pivot of Hoerricks' essay, because after years of fighting their categories, an exhaustion sets in.
I can only imagine.
Hoerricks writes that there comes a point in any long critique when naming the machine is no longer enough.
Naming the machine.
Yes. What's fascinating here is how the essay warns of a hidden danger within advocacy itself. Identifying the harm is necessary work, obviously, but the act of critique can quietly become another kind of orbit.
What exactly does an orbit of critique look like in practice, like on a day-to-day level?
It happens when you become entirely defined by your opposition to the dominant system. You spend all your energy naming the enclosures, the artificial boundaries, the societal rules, the corporate structures that box you in.
Right.
By constantly circling those enclosures, pointing out how unfair and rigid they are, your entire life remains centered around the very machine that oppresses you. You are reacting to it. Your center of gravity is still the market.
It's like spending your life diagnosing a fatally broken car engine, but never actually stepping out of the garage.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
You can spend decades pointing at the cracked belts, measuring the faulty spark plugs, writing comprehensive peer-reviewed manuals on exactly how and why the engine is failing. You become the world's leading authority on the brokenness of this specific vehicle. But the tragic part is, you are still standing in the garage. You haven't traveled anywhere.
Exactly. The gravity of the critique keeps you anchored. And while you're busy endlessly circling the machine and pointing out its flaws, the machine doesn't stop. It just continues to operate.
It doesn't care that you're analyzing it.
Not at all. And Hoerricks points out a terrifying consequence of staying in that orbit. It allows the machine to continue stealing from you.
Let's get into the mechanics of that theft. Because Hoerricks uses a very specific phrase. The essay states that orbiting the machine allows it to perpetuate the thefts of language, timing, and meaning.
Right. We have to look at how the market dictates the baseline terms of human existence.
Okay, walk me through the thefts.
Sure. It steals language by forcing people to communicate in ways optimized for economic efficiency. Think of the demand for corporate jargon, forced networking, or masking one's natural communication style just to seem professional.
Ugh, the forced networking.
The worst. Then, it steals timing by imposing standardized paces for production, learning, and simply existing. And lastly, it steals meaning by declaring that the only valid use of human focus is that which produces capital.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. And again, I'm going to play devil's advocate for the listener. Doesn't capitalism steal timing and meaning from all of us, regardless of our neurotype?
It's a fair question.
Because, I mean, the exhaustion of the 9-to-5 grind, the pressure to hit arbitrary career milestones by age 30, the feeling that our hobbies are a waste of time unless we monetize them, that theft feels pretty universal. How is this dynamic distinctly impacting the autistic community?
Well, the pressure exists for everyone, yes, but the divergence is much, much sharper for autistic individuals. The market's standard timelines, the 40-hour work week, the expectation of linear career progression, the requirement to be socially on in an open-plan office for 8 hours a day, those are fundamentally neurotypical timelines.
Right, they're built for a specific kind of brain.
Exactly. They are designed for and by a neurotypical nervous system.
So while a neurotypical person might find the market's timing exhausting or annoying, an autistic person might find that exact same timing physically and psychologically agonizing.
Yes. When the market demands a pace or a sensory environment that runs entirely counter to an artistic person's neurology, the theft isn't just an inconvenience, it's an acute trauma.
Wow.
And what's being stolen in that moment is autistic-led meaning. Think about the autistic joy found in intense, deep dives into special interests, like hours spent researching a niche topic or engaging in repetitive regulating behaviors.
Things that bring genuine peace and satisfaction.
Right. But these rhythms do not map onto a quarterly earnings report. Therefore, the market labels them a waste of time, stripping the meaning right out of the individual's lived experience.
So the market looks at someone finding immense joy and regulation in, say, sorting a massive collection of vintage maps. And instead of seeing a human experiencing profound engagement, it just sees unproductive hours. And if you are stuck in the orbit of critique, you spend your energy trying to convince the market that your map collection has value. You exhaust yourself trying to translate your meaning into their language.
And the translation itself is the trap. You are still asking the ledger for permission to exist.
So if pointing out the flaws just keeps us trapped in the garage, we have to abandon the garage entirely. Did Hoerricks map out what building a new vehicle actually looks like? What's the alternative to the market's imagination?
Yes, Hoerricks answers this by challenging us to shift from critique to creation. The goal isn't to make the machine slightly kinder or to secure a slightly better column on the ledger. The goal is the creation of what the essay calls counterworlds.
So what does this all mean? Like, counterworld sounds almost like science fiction, but the essay grounds it in very practical sociology, right? What actually defines a counterworld?
A counterworld is a space, and it can be physical, relational, or conceptual, that operates on entirely different metrics than the dominant culture. Hoerricks specifically argues that these alternative spaces must be built on 3 foundational pillars: relationship, coherence, and autistic-led meaning.
I want to pause on the word coherence because that feels like the linchpin of this entire philosophy. What does coherence mean in this context?
Let's look at it through the lens of the nervous system. An incoherent environment is one where the external demands violently clash with an individual's internal reality.
Like the open plan office we talked about.
Exactly. A bustling, brightly lit office with unwritten social rules and constant interruptions is incoherent for many autistic people. It requires massive amounts of energy just to process and survive.
And coherence is the opposite of that.
Right. Coherence is when the external environment aligns with internal needs. It is an environment where sensory input is manageable, where communication is direct and honest, and where a person's natural way of being makes sense to the people around them.
Coherence is a space where you don't have to translate yourself.
Exactly that. You don't have to mask. Building a counterworld means conceptualizing a life and a support system that begins entirely outside the realm of tragedy, repair, or productivity. It means valuing a person simply because you are in a relationship with them, not because of what they produce.
Thinking about the mechanism of a counterworld, it reminds me of playing a board game, like Monopoly.
Oh, I hate Monopoly.
Everyone hates Monopoly because the traditional market is exactly like Monopoly. The rules are rigid, the goal is purely to extract capital from everyone else, and if you run out of money, you're out of the game. You are a burden.
The ledger in action.
Right. But a counterworld is like saying, you know what, I refuse to play Monopoly anymore. I'm going to get off the floor, walk outside, and cultivate a community garden instead.
That is a perfect analogy.
You aren't just trying to change the rules of the board game. You are stepping off the board entirely to play a completely different life-sustaining game. The garden thrives completely outside the traditional monopoly logic. It is held together by relationship and coherence. People plant what they want when they have the energy, and the value is in the shared harvest, not the profit.
It captures the mechanism beautifully. In that community garden, the contribution is self-determined. An individual doesn't have to justify their existence by, producing a daily quota of tomatoes.
Right.
They belong simply because they're a part of the community. Their meaning is autistic-led, or at the very least, intrinsically led.
It's a profound shift in perspective. To just exist, to engage deeply with what matters to you, and for that to simply be enough.
It is, but it requires immense courage to step into that reality. To build a counterworld means letting go of the familiar, validating language of the market. It means accepting that the dominant culture, the people still holding their invisible calculators, might never understand or validate your worth.
You have to be okay with that.
Yeah, you have to be willing to be completely incomprehensible to the machine.
Because the machine's imagination is fundamentally too small to hold the entirety of human experience. I mean, this has been a massive paradigm shift.
Truly.
We started today by examining the trap of the ledger, how the traditional economic market rigidly forces autistic lives into boxes labeled boon, repair project, or selective asset.
We then looked at the hidden danger of advocacy, exploring how the act of fighting those labels can morph into an endless orbit of critique. Circling the same enclosures keeps us anchored to the market, allowing the continued thefts of our language, our timing, and our meaning.
And finally, we explored Hoerricks' radical invitation, the call to stop seeking validation from a system incapable of providing it and to redirect our energy toward the creation of counterworlds. Spaces built like community gardens, rooted in relationship, coherence, and self-determined meaning.
Because moving beyond the market's imagination isn't about winning a rigged game. It's about refusing to play it entirely.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, take a moment to reflect on your own daily life. Where are you trapped in another kind of orbit? Where are you exhausting yourself, sanding down your own edges, trying to prove your worth to a ledger that wasn't built for you? And what would it look like for you to step out of the garage and start building a counterworld of your own?
It is a beautiful and necessary vision, but there is one final lingering tension to consider as we leave you today.
Lay it on us.
Let's say we do this. We successfully build these vibrant, non-market counterworlds based entirely on relationship and coherence. What happens when those fragile community gardens inevitably intersect with the dominant traditional economy? Can a counterworld truly survive inside a capitalist society without eventually being paved over, absorbed, or commodified?
Man, that is the question that keeps us awake at night. Until next time.